Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings once again, everyone. Welcome to another show. My name is Bruce Markison, and I am joined by producer and co-host Tracy Asteria. Tracy, what's going on with you this week?
Not too much, Bruce. Enjoying some really nice summer weather finally, which is always very much welcomed. How's everything been going for you?
Good, good. I'm curious, were you able to convince your family to take you out to dinner, as I implored them to do?
Unfortunately, no, but on my parents came for birthday cake, which was great. So, I'll take that. That was a real win. So,
Yeah,
and
that's
and my
good.
boys did come downstairs for a few moments. So, yeah.
Very nice. It can be sometimes difficult to pry them from their rooms. Yeah, I know that.
Yes.
I'll tell you one thing. It has been scorchingly hot here in central New York over this past week. The heat and the humidity have been rising seemingly every day. How is the weather where you've been? Yeah.
In what you just said in Houston, we describe that as spring. So the summers here are brutal. And
Yes.
I went to the Monster Bash conference in June, and I'm going to the Monsterama conference in Atlanta in August, and a lot of good reasons to go. But one of the secondary reasons is the air conditioners here are off for 2 weeks while I'm gone, and so that keeps the bill where I can actually afford to pay it.
And there we get an early word from our guest, Frank Dello Stritto. I do want to give Frank a proper introduction. He is returning. This is his second time on the Ghostly Gallery. Frank is an award-winning author. He has written, by my estimate, 8 books, including some really interesting titles. I think the first book he wrote, if I'm not mistaken, I Saw What I Saw When I Saw It, growing up in the 1950s and 60s with television reruns and old movies. He's also done a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, the history and mythology of classic horror films. Wrote a great book about Bela Lugosi, Vampire Over London. He has written a number of novels, and his latest book, which is going to be the focus of our conversation on this week's episode, is his 5th novel, and it is titled Deals with the Devil, Dialogues with Death. Joining us is Frank Dello Stritto. Official welcome, Frank. How have you been?
I've been great, and I'm so happy to be here.
You did mention being at Monster Bash, and I had a chance to see your presentation on Murders in the Rue Morgue, the Bela Lugosi film from the early 1930s. Both you and Greg Mank did great presentations. It was wonderful to see you, your wife Linda, our friend Dan Day as well. Hopefully you had a chance to meet some of the other folks that were in attendance. I'm sure that you did. You seemingly never miss Monster Bash. It has become a spring/summer tradition for you. You always seem to have a great time there.
Yes. When I was working, I went every odd year. So 2001, 3, 5, 7, 9. I retired in 2013, and we've gone every year since then, except for COVID. And we have a ball there. I give talks. I sell books. I meet a lot of interesting people. They have to come to me because when you have a table selling books, you're kind of chained to the table, and so they come to me. But they some buy a book, some don't. But we hear a lot of interesting conversations. Meet a lot of neat people there.
My wife Sue went with me to the Monster Bash, second time that she's been there. Third time for me overall. We were able to get your 2 latest books. We're going to be talking with you about Deals with the Devil on this program. For those who might not be aware, Frank is a 2-time winner of the Rondo Award, very prestigious horror awards that are announced every spring, and also an elected member of the Monster Kid Hall of Fame, so very prestigious there. This book that you have done now, and for those who are watching on YouTube, you'll get a chance to see the cover of the book. And you can see it's an image of Vincent Price. And I'm curious, Frank, is this image from Mask of the Red Death, or is this something that was altered in some way by the artist that worked on this with you?
That image is from the imagination of George Chastain, who did the dust jacket art and the cover art. I can take the dust jacket off the book, and we have a wraparound cover for the first time on the book itself, which has on my left
Oh, wow.
is Satan from the 1926 Faust, and my right is the Angel of Death from the Swedish classic Deals with the Devil, and the Devils and Satan's Deaths and the Devil's latest recruits are dancing in the middle there. So, yeah, George does great art, and I'm so glad that he does it for me. And by the way, he also does the end page art, which in this case is visions of hell. So we got it on the front, and then we have a different one on the back with a little bonus picture of Satan there from Roger Corman's The Undead, 1957.
Well, the dust jacket cover art is really striking, and I think it's, of all the covers that you guys have put together, and there have been some wonderful covers, I think this one is the most eye-catching. It's really good.
Yeah, there's two reasons for that. One is as George gets older, he gets better. And the second one is it has a lot of red.
Yeah.
and red seems to go on a good cover. But yes, I agree. It's arguably the best cover we've done.
Well, the prominent red color and the fact that you've got Vincent Price there, that's what made me think of Mask of the Red Death. But I didn't remember him looking exactly like that in the film. So that's kind of what made me wonder. But it is really beautifully done.
Yeah.
Frank, let's talk about the storyline for this book. If you could give us maybe a 1 or a 2 paragraph synopsis of the basic plot, what's going on in the book. Tell us exactly what's going to, well, not exactly, but give us a general sense of what transpires in this.
Okay, I'll try to be generally exact. The book begins in 1904 with a disaster that is true to life, but very few people know about today, the General Slocum disaster, which was the largest single loss of life in New York City before 9/11. And a young man is basically a victim of that. And he doesn't know it, but he's dead and on his way to heaven. And the devil snatches him back and says, you know, heaven's not for you. And he talks up how the serenity is not for you. And he makes him a deal. Eternal life, eternal youth, eternal health in exchange for his soul. The young man doesn't really believe this. And he signs the agreement basically to get rid of this annoying man.
Mm-hmm.
And then in short order, he finds out, wow, it is a real deal. And he lives through the decades, and he meets the devil many times. One of the side benefits is when the devil comes to earth, this man will see him, and he'll see something else. He'll see the angel of death, who is a bit ticked that someone he had taken and passed on came back. And he also sees a few demons, notably Lilith in mythology, not in the Bible, but in the mythology, Adam's first wife, a real she-demon. And so he goes from one adventure to another, all the while he's changing as an individual. He doesn't know if it's because he's lost his soul or he's learning or the devil is guiding him, but he witnesses one tragedy after another until he's ready to exercise his escape clause. And I say escape clause because I got the idea from an episode of Twilight Zone called Escape Clause, where the devil buys a man's soul for the same deal, but there's an escape clause. If the man ever wants to leave and go to hell and get out of earth, he can. And so it becomes a search for self, a search for soul. And I won't tell you the ending, except it does end on 9/11. So it begins on what is now the second highest loss of life in the city in a day, and ends on the number one.
Those who have read your other novels in the past know that your stories are influenced by films, characters, monsters from earlier decades. What was the specific influence that got you started on this book?
Well, I describe it as a Christmas tree. You get an idea for a story, and then you were say, well, who can I build this around? And well, build around the narrator, but deals with the devil. And so the the basic story of a man's search for self who has lost his soul, going through the decades, the generations, wondering what it all means. That's the spine of the story. That's the Christmas tree, and then the ornaments are meeting the devil. The devil and death, especially the devil, are kind of colorful characters. And as I started writing the book, I started remembering all these devils that appeared in the movies and TVs, even when I was a kid. They didn't all get into the book, but there were, there were shows when I was a kid. There was a comedy with Sid Caesar as the devil. Some of your younger people won't know who Sid Caesar was, but he was a major comic star during the 1950s. And there was a Western with the devil in it. And Damn Yankees is a musical with the devil with it. And I don't really remember much about the shows or the movies except the devil, who's always an unforgettable character. So I decided to build a book, not around him, but have him on the, again, he's the ornaments to the Christmas tree. The spine of the book, the Christmas tree itself, is the story of this young man. The ornaments are the appearances by the devil and death. And I had no shortage of devils. They were many movies. Devil appears 5 times in The Twilight Zone. Death, by the way, appears 3 times in The Twilight Zone. Devil only gets into Thriller once, but there's many movies with Satan in them, and I brought them all in. I brought their dialogue with them, and I weave them into the plot. That's basically my approach. I don't need to invent characters. I just say, okay, I need an antique dealer. Who in the movies can I do? And in the movies and TV, the devil kind of likes antiques, so the antique shop pop up quite a bit in it.
Frank, you also make a number of historical references in this book. You mentioned one of the tragedies, the General Slocum disaster, which I'm going to ask you to expound on a little bit in a moment. There's also the Great San Francisco earthquake. There is the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. I mean, these are all major tragedies in American history that occurred during the 20th century. So in writing a book that is essentially fiction, it's a novel, obviously a lot of research went into creating this story. And I would think that really had to lengthen the process for you, no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't need to research the devil in the movies because I had been watching those movies and television shows my whole life. So there was no research there. But when I started, the only reason I knew about the General Slocum is that in the Clark Gable movie of 1934, Manhattan Melodrama, it starts with the General Slocum. And I remembered seeing that, and a commentator, I guess it was on Turner Classic Movies, said this was a real event. I'd never heard about it before. Most people hadn't, but it was a horrible thing. I weave the real life events in. I credit one of my nephews with that. One of the nicest compliments I ever got on a book was on my Carl Denham's Giant Monsters, which is built around King Kong. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to him. He says, "Was Carl Denham a real man?" Because I had woven a lot of real life events into that as well. So this book, I probably have more real life events popping up through the plot, and they fit in well. I mean, tragedy fits in well with the devil. And I'll point out that when the narrator, the man who has sold his soul, talks to the devil says, why would I cause that? If these people had lived longer, I would have had more of them. The ones I already had, they weren't going anywhere. And only the good die young is true because I need more time to get some people than with others. So I have no reason to cause all these deaths, but the devil guides this man from one tragedy to another.
Frank, tell us more about that General Slocum disaster, because I honestly had not heard of it prior to reading your book. I had to look it up myself to get a little bit more historical reference. Give us a little bit more on that, if you would.
Well, the General Slocum was basically a riverboat in New York. It ferried people. It got charters in New York. And in 1904, it had a charter to take a church group, 1,300 people, so a large church group from 3rd Street and Lower Manhattan up to up to Long Island to a picnic ground. It was their annual picnic, and they would, so 1,300 people got on this riverboat, and they were mostly Germans, German Americans, German speaking. It was an area of Little Germany, and so these 1,300 people got on, and ironic name, at an interface between the East River and the Long Island and the water from the Atlantic. I think it's Long Island Sound. Meet. There's a lot of whirlpools and all that, and that's a location called Hellgate because it's very, very treacherous sailing and there. And about at Hellgate, the boat caught fire, and it spread like instantaneously. And so these people were trying to get off. The life jackets were cork life jackets, but they hadn't been used in 13 years. And cork is buoyant when it's young, but as it's old, it turns to dust and it absorbs water. So mothers and fathers were putting life jackets on their young children, throwing them in the water, and they sank like a rock. So when it was all done, more than 1,000 people were dead. The exact total was never determined, as often happens. That'll happen in Kerrville now. They'll never know how many people have died, and they'll never know how many people actually died on the General Slocum. But it was over 1,000, so that was a major tragedy.
Another disaster that you mentioned in the book, and one that again I'd heard of it, but I wasn't that familiar with, and that's the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Tell us a bit more about that, please.
And that was in 1911, and there were garment factories that tended to be on upper floors. There was a tragedy much like this one, the one in 1911, earlier in the year or the year before in Newark, New Jersey, which is not quite the death toll, but this was a shirt factory where people, seamstresses sewed shirts together on an upper floor, and then a fire would break out and they couldn't get out. In New York, it's in the book, but I think it was on the 9th or 10th floor. 100 more than 100 young women were up there, mostly Jewish and some Italian, mostly immigrants. Basically working by sewing shirts all day, and a fire broke out. A lot of flammable they didn't have the controls that we have today. They didn't have the fire resistant materials we have today. So when these fires broke out, they spread quickly. There was fabric around and thread, which would catch immediately. And these girls were trapped there. And a lot of them jumped out the windows to their deaths. But it was either that or be burned to death, or jump out with the slight chance of making it, which they didn't. And I think in the end, 111 young women died. And I say young women; these were girls in their teens. And so that was the trigger to get a lot more control on or regulations, whatever, on how these factories were run. And I don't think there's been a disaster like that since then because of that. But that was a real horrible one. And I grew up in northern New Jersey. And you'd hear about that about once a year on the news or something. There'd be a feature. And this was in the 1950s. So this was 50 years after the event. So there were still people alive who had gotten out. And, so you'd hear, I remember growing up hearing firsthand accounts of it. And for instance, in this and for this and in at least one of the other disasters in the book, the exit doors were locked, so people couldn't leave early, or people couldn't sneak into a venue, and so when something bad happened, there was no way out.
Frank, I'm curious how tricky it is to do a book like this, where you do have so many historical references, but then the overall theme is largely a work of fiction. How hard is it to maintain that balance of the accuracy of history versus fitting in something that makes your story better? I would imagine that's a tricky line to kind of work across.
It's a tricky line. The real challenge is consistency. You want to make sure you're not contradicting yourself in chapter 7 with something you said in chapter 2. But I don't find that much of a challenge at all. I mean, some people do. I don't know if my gift is great writing, but I can put puzzles together. And when I started writing the book, I didn't I couldn't have given you a list of the disasters or the historical events that would be in it. But as the narrative went along, I said, okay, it's 1911. What am I going to put in? Oh, the Triangle Shirt Factory fire. It's 1912.
Yeah.
What do I know? Oh, I need the Titanic. I got to get this guy on the boat. you know, and
Yeah.
Chicago, the St. Valentine's Day's massacre. Oh, I got to get him to Chicago. So but I don't find that much of a challenge. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no shortage of American tragedies and disasters that have taken place over time. I mean, almost every year, every few years, something happens.
Well, like they say about airplanes, you put hundreds of people in thin metal tubes and shoot them through the air at 600 miles an hour. Sooner or later, something goes wrong. So yes, I mean, wherever you get clusters of people, there is a danger. There'll be fire, floods, as we saw this week, the sinking of the Titanic. Big systems break down. They haven't planned for every contingency. So yes, I mean that's just the way it is. People in groups. Sooner or later, there will be a tragic that takes more lives than we'd like.
Our guest is award-winning author Frank Dello Stritto. We're talking about his new book, Deals with the Devil, Dialogues with Death. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back in just a moment, and we'll continue our discussion. Stay with us on the Ghostly Gallery. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. My name is Bruce Markison. My co-host Tracy Asteria. We continue our conversation with author Frank Dello Stritto about his new book, Deals with the Devil, Dialogues with Death. It is now newly available from Cult Movies Press. And like all of Frank's books, not only well written, but very beautifully presented, lots of wonderful photography, cover art, inside cover art, really a well-done production. And that's pretty much what we've always come to expect from Frank. Frank, we've talked about some of these tragedies that you include as reference points in the book, and there are a number of them. I was reading one of the reviews of your book, and a reader really admired your chapter that you wrote on the Hindenburg explosion, saying that when he read it, it very much had a Twilight Zone feel. Was that something you were trying to achieve? Do you kind of agree with that assessment?
Yeah, for the record, I did not write that review, and but yeah, I brought two characters from Twilight Zone into it. There's a famous Twilight Zone episode called "Nightmare at 20,000 Feet" with William Shatner as a man having a nervous breakdown on a flight. So I took him off the plane and I put him on the Hindenburg, and also on the Hindenburg is Vincent Price plays the devil in the story from mankind, and so he's on there as well. So yeah, it probably had a Twilight Zone feel because when I bring characters from different places in, I bring their dialogue with them. So he was saying exactly what he said in the Twilight Zone episode, and it fit perfectly because he had a feeling the Hindenburg was going to crash, but nobody would listen to him, and then of course it did. And so yes, I was. Well, I didn't have to try to give it a Twilight Zone feel. I had the characters to give it a Twilight Zone feel. And also that was a fun chapter because I brought in I was running out of I had plenty of devils to bring into my story, but not enough deaths. You can probably name 5 devils in the movies for every death you can name. So I was running out of devils, so I brought in Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now, and his monologue when he's telling you you're not a soldier, you're not an assassin, you're a errand boy sent by grocery clerks to collect the bill. His dialogue fit right in. So I put him in there. And again, that, whether I'm a good writer or not is something else, somebody else's opinion. But I can put these pieces together well, and that's what gets me through the day.
What do you hope that readers walk away from after reading your book? Do you hope that they have like this sense of hope or just a sharper awareness of the darkness that we kind of live beside?
I don't think my books instill people with a sense of hope. I think maybe the sharper awareness. I think maybe here's a guy that didn't quite do it right. Maybe you can do better type things. I I'm not, I'm always fascinated by the reviews because people always find things including Bruce, finds things in the book that I didn't know were there, and that's good because of whenever you sit down and say I'm going to put this in the book, and I don't think that works. It kind of hangs there, and so what they walk away with, you really have to ask the readers what they walk away with. Uh, I don't have a good answer for that. I don't think people walk away walking lighter and say, "Gee, I'm full of hope now. I read Frank's book." I don't think they're walking away depressed either. I hope they walk away with a sense of wonder. And my endings, which I've been my last two books, I've been out on a limb with my endings, and I was afraid people would say that's ridiculous. But so far, so good. No, people like the ending, which is neither hopeful nor depressing. It's just saying, "Oh." I remember, one of my favorite shows was Twilight Zone, and Twilight Zone had good episodes, had bad episodes, but their good episode, you kept thinking about. It came on my bedtime in those days was 10 o'clock, but on Friday nights when Twilight Zone came on, I could stay till 10:30 to watch Twilight Zone, and you'd go to bed thinking about it. What was going on there? What was he saying, and all that. And if my readers walk away with that, then I'm a happy man.
That's awesome, and I think that's what the best books ever do, is they make you think about them long once you've closed the cover on that last page.
Frank, we've talked in the past, and I've always gotten the sense that you're a tremendous lover and appreciative of the Universal Studios classics, the black and white films of the 30s, 40s into the 1950s. I didn't know that you were such a fan of The Twilight Zone, and that's obviously coming out now. My absolute favorite episode is The Masks, which is set in New Orleans, Mardi Gras time. It's a wonderful episode. It's got a very interesting message. Do you have an absolute number one favorite episode of the original Rod Serling show?
Um, no, I wrote an article many years ago on my favorite Twilight Zones, and I was supposed to come up with a dozen. That's what the magazine wanted, and I couldn't get it down below 14. I think Perchance the Dream is as close as the Twilight Zone gets to an erotic thriller. Twilight Zone is pretty conservative, by the way. It doesn't, it might be daring on ideas, but not on anything else. And Perchance the Dream is one of them. 5 characters in search of an ending, which I don't particularly love the ending to, but I think the 29 minutes before that are really great. The Howling Man, the Howling Man is a tale with the devil, so it's covered in my book. But one of the things about the Howling Man are the camera angles. It seems everything's a little out of kilter there. The camera bends all over the place, and it really gives a haunting feel. The Twilight Zone that got to me when I first saw it is called The Grave, and that's when Lee Marvin is a gunfighter who's been dared to go up to his old rival's grave, and because the rival said, "If you ever come here, I'm pulling you down with me," and that was really scary. So yeah, there's a handful of them that I think are very good. The two with William Shatner, as I said, Nightmare at 20,000 feet is one, and the other one is what do they call it? It's when he stops in a diner on the road, and there's a fortune telling machine that does an incredible job at telling his fortune. That's in the book as well. I can't remember the name of the episode off the top of my head. And I wish they were made a couple of years apart, and I wish they had given the character the same name, because you could say he's at a different stage of life. The first one, he's real hopeful until he gets hooked by this fortune telling machine. The second one, he's recovering from a nervous breakdown. So I like to think of them as a pair, but they're not.
Yeah, in the one on the airplane, I think for some reason I remember his character's name, Bob Wilson, comes to mind.
Yeah,
and he is married in that one. And I don't remember the name of the other episode, but I know exactly what you're talking about. He and his wife are on like some kind of a vacation cross country trip. He, I believe, has just had a job interview, and he's waiting to see if he gets this job, which would represent a major promotion for him, major increase in salary. And I think they're traveling. I want to say they're traveling back home. Maybe he was just on the interview, or and he's not certain if he's going to get the job or not. And they're kind of anxiously awaiting that phone call. And something's wrong with their car, and they have to stop in this diner, and it has this really funky looking fortune-telling machine, which is a great visual that was used by Serling and his staff in that film. You know, we talked earlier, Frank, about Vincent Price and his image on the cover. I know that Bela Lugosi is your favorite actor of all time. Is Price another one of the guys that you really kind of cherish when you consider the works that he did?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think he's most famous today for his Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe movies, which I think he's fine. He carries those movies. I think his finest work was before he got into horror as a character actor in the 40s with movies like Laura and but I won't try to name them because I'll get them wrong. But he was a really good character actor, and he resisted getting into being typecast in horror. But when he was more than fine. And what is his best performance? It may be in House on Haunted Hill, which is a schlocky movie, and a bit over the top. But he was just they needed someone like him in those movies to pull it off. Just like they needed Bela Lugosi in his movies to pull them off, because without him, they would have been really bad. Even the bad ones would have been really bad without him. And I think it was the same with Vincent Price. And but his Poe movies are a fine body of work.
Speaking of great actors like Price, Lugosi, you talk about a Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney. In all of your novels, you do something interesting. You use photographs of famous Hollywood actors, many of them known for their work in the horror genre, and they portray characters in your book. So in the captions, you identify them as a character, even though the photograph is of a famous actor from a movie. I was really curious how you came up with that device, because I think it works really effectively in just about all the novels you've done.
Yeah, well, I just so people know, I published 8 books now. I've written 9, but one will never see the light of day. That's one of my humanitarian efforts. And the first 3 were nonfiction. They were histories of horror films or analysis, or one was a memoir. I saw what I saw when I saw it, is basically my memoir of growing up. And I said, okay, I've written a history book, Bela Lugosi in Britain. I've written an analysis book, a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. I have written a memoir. I saw what I saw. What's left? And I said, well, I'll write a novel. And that was, I don't know if it's my best novel, but it's certainly my best-selling one. That is A Werewolf Remembers, the Testament of Lawrence Stewart Talbot. And and the undercurrent of that book is family. In The Wolfman, Talbot has been estranged from his father for 18 years. He comes home. It's not the easiest reunion. He had a brother who died. That's his reason for coming home. And so I had to get into their families. And Claude Rains plays Lawrence Talbot's father. He's very much into the history of the family and all that. So I had to bring into the history of the family. And I said, okay, I'm going to bring in portraits of that family. So I need a Talbot from the 15th century. Hey, Claude Rains played a prince in Adventures of Robin. I need an 18th century soldier. Hey, this picture of Lon Chaney, though he's not an 18th century, but looks like it. So I brought them in, and once you cross that boundary, you say, "What the heck? I'm going all the way with that. Let me see how far I can bring that." So it's been going on ever since.
In this book, you have photos of all sorts of people. Vampira is one of the people that is shown. I'm just sort of looking randomly through some of the other photographs here. There is one that you mentioned earlier, which is from Mask of the Red Death. You've got, various characters, some of them from very, famous horror films. So you've done that, but you also have some interesting drawings and paintings from American history that tie into your subject matter. That's something that you did that's a little bit of a different twist with this book.
Yes, well, in my books, I'm by engineering I'm by training, I'm an engineer, and I have a degree in physics and graduate degrees in engineering. And so I'm rather methodical. So all my chapters start with a full page picture, and all my chapters begin on an odd page. So there's an even page with a full page picture, and then page one of a chapter. So yeah, I didn't want to go, you put a picture in from the story, and that kind of gives away what you're trying to build up to. So I downloaded images. There's plenty of, 17th century engravings of the angel of death or Satan visiting, someone. So I said, these are really neat. I really started that on my mummy book, the Passion of the Mummy. And there's all these neat pictures of the 1800s of archaeologists or adventurers that went to Egypt and made these detailed drawings of them. And so I brought them in where I could, and I thought that fit really well into the devil book here. Not so well into my zombie book because there's not nearly as many, but there's a wealth of very old, very good art on the devil and the angel of death, and very old, so it's beyond any copyright. So I brought them in, and I think it did well.
Another thing you did with this book, in terms of written references, you have many verses from the Bible that are included that fit into the narrative. And I thought that was something you did especially skillfully here. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, in chapter 1, there's a question that runs through the book. Does the devil know the future? Does God know the future? And in the book of Job, the devil and God make a wager for Job's behavior. The devil says Job is a devout worshiper, but he's got a good life. His family loves him. He's got money. He's got health and all that. If things weren't so good, he wouldn't like him. So he bets God on that. But on other parts of the Bible, you will get the impression that God knows the future. So when this young man sells his soul, he says to the devil, he says, well, if you're the devil, you know how all this is going to turn out, right? You know what's going to happen to me. And the devil insists he does not. But throughout the book, he kind of gives hints that he does. And when I looked into that, I said, okay. And then the devil hands him a Bible. He says, you think you know all these things from reading, but you haven't read the one story that might tell you something. He hands him a Bible. So I took off from there, and I brought that in when I could. Now, I don't bring it all that often. It's not every chapter, but when you sell your soul, you might want to have more of an urge to pick up the Bible to see what you're getting into. So I bring it up when it's appropriate. So yeah, I got it in there, and it fit in well. It fit in like a glove. I didn't have to do anything. It was just the right decision to make, and I knew that right away that this was going to be okay.
Frank, I'm kind of curious. With this book, it sounds absolutely fascinating. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but would this be one of your projects that you would really like to see maybe developed into a movie at some point?
If any, I wouldn't mind any of my books being developed into a movie. So this one, I mean, Dan Day, who you mentioned at the outset, has always said they should be a mini series based on my books because it's a 500-page book and it's pretty detailed. So it's not I don't think it is a typical deal with the devil book or deal with the devil story melodrama that you'd see on Twilight Zone or in the movies. So what author would say no to that? Right? And but
Yeah.
if anybody's listening, let me say I won't give you a hard time. It's my book. It's your movie. So once you buy the rights, I'll help you. But it's your movie.
Oh my gosh, this even sounds like such a fascinating story. I think it would even be like an excellent radio drama series too. I think that would be
Hmm.
superb.
Does radio drama still exist?
Absolutely, it
Okay,
does.
I'm not a radio guy. I listen to talk radio. I wouldn't know where to get a radio drama. Okay.
Hey, Tracy, where would people find something like that? Is something like that maybe available on YouTube or like Sirius radio? Is that a possibility there?
Oh, absolutely. There's actually a number of YouTube channels who do radio dramas. So it's definitely
Hmm.
out there and they're quite popular.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Frank, I'm about 120 pages in the book. I'm very much enjoying it at this point. I am a slow reader, so it is going to take me a while to get through the entire book. Your books are always detailed, they're in depth, so it's not something I can read in the matter of a few weeks. It's going to take a little bit longer. I'm curious, are you one of those authors that looks at reviews? Are you concerned by them? Do you care about them? Do you ignore them? What's your attitude with regard to that?
Well, to be honest, I don't get that many reviews. It's not like, every time I pick up something, they're reviewing me. No, but I've had good reviews. I've had bad reviews. There was this one magazine, which I can't remember the name of. I think it's defunct now, but even if I did remember the name, I wouldn't name them because I don't need to make an enemy for life, but they didn't like my books. And,
Yeah.
I read it and I put it aside. I guess the first review you get, it can make or break your day. What I mainly get, I get comments from readers and people who, if there's anybody out there who doesn't like the book, they never write me. All the comments I get from readers, I'd say I don't get a lot. I get one a month or so from
Mhm.
a reader, and they really seem to like them, and they're praising me to the sky. And my first sentence when I answer them is always, "You made my day," and it's true. So, when it comes to book reviews, it's like I'm a Yankee fan. When they win, I'm happy. When they lose, I just don't even look at it.
When you were at Monster Bash, did any of the fans come up to you and talk to you about your book?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't call them
Yeah.
my fans. They were Munster fans. But, oh no, they came up and so, when they come up and say nice things, that's great. When they come up and ask me questions, this is a 500-page book, and I've got 8 of them now. So that you add that up, that's 4,000. They ask me questions. You said this, I go, did I? So that can get a little embarrassing. If I'm asked the same question twice, I usually have a great answer for the second one. But
Hmm.
I always drum. They come, oh, this is great, I love it. But why did you do this? And the honest answer is, did I do that? It's I really don't remember. But yes, they
Yeah.
do. They come up and we talk about them, and they always making suggestions for the next book, none of which are even close to what I do want to do on the next book. So yeah, they come up. It's great to talk. They're good people.
Nice.
Yeah.
And they're my readers. They're readers and they buy books. So as far as I'm concerned, they can say anything they want.
Well, you've certainly received a lot of praise from your peers. The Rondo Awards, you've done very well. You win seemingly something just about every year in one of the categories that is included. And you are a Monster Kid Hall of Fame member, and that's something to be very proud of as well. This book is dedicated to 2 people. One of them was your brother-in-law, Glenn Morlock Wilson, and the other noted horror historian David Skal, one of the great writers, one of the great experts on horror history. We lost him just a couple of years ago. Tell us a little bit about David's influence on you as a writer, because I know you mentioned that to me at Monster Bash, that you not only met him, but you talked to him rather extensively, and he really helped you out.
Yeah. Well, he didn't help me out by actually assisting me. He helped me out by what he wrote. And I think
Mhm.
I don't know if I've read all his books, but I've read quite a few of his books. And the first one was about 1990. And the writing on classic horror films up until then, with some exceptions, up until then was basically fan stuff. Not to put the fans down, but it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was scholarly, with exceptions. I could go back and probably come up with a dozen books over the 30 years that I think were scholarly, but David gave that a gravitas and a level of research I hadn't seen before. And that was really an inspiration to me. And it wasn't until some years after I read one or two of David's books that I started trying to do the same thing. So I owe that to David. I think everyone that considers them a serious student, that considers themselves a serious student of classic horror films, owes something to David Skal, and I certainly do. And the only extensive conversation I had with him was we sat next to each other at a conference actually the first monster movie conference I ever sold books at was a 2000 Cult Movies conference. The Cult Movies magazine had one conference in 2000, and we were sitting next to each other selling our books. And I spoke to him, and he really made me feel great because I gave a talk, and he had been looking for a picture of Hamilton Dean as Dracula. Now, Hamilton Dean wrote the Dracula play and always played Van Helsing, which is in the play is the main part. That's the most dialogue. And later in his career, 1939, Hamilton Dean played Dracula. He was getting older by then, didn't want to handle all that dialogue. He played Dracula. And David Skal had said in one of his books, no photo survives of him, which was incredible, but seemed to be true. Well, I worked for an oil company, so they transferred me around, and I was living in the UK, and I went to the British Library, and in 1939, London had something like 27 daily newspapers. I mean, it was a different world in foreign newspapers. And I went through each one, and I found one photograph, and I gave it to David, and he was just so happy. He put it in his second edition of his Hollywood Gothic book, and he wrote me a letter saying what a great researcher I was, because I found the book, the photograph is like 2 inches by 2 inches, but it is undoubtedly Hamilton Dean as Dracula. He was so appreciative. But he was, I can't say he was a close friend of mine. We only spoke 3 or 4 times in our lives, but I read his books, and it was his books that were a real inspiration to me. So I was glad to dedicate this to him.
Looking back at your talks with him, reading his books, there's no question you feel that it's made your books better.
Oh yeah. Well, it pointed the way. It pointed the way. Who are you writing for? I mean, you're not. When I say fan magazines, they're writing for fans. But who are you writing for? If you talk up to people. I mean, you put in ideas and all that they didn't expect. And that's what I think David's books are. He had a very, he did great research, but he went in directions you didn't expect. And I said, that's what, if somebody turns a page and pretty much can guess what's going to be on it, you've lost them. Same in my talks. If someone knows what your next slide is more than once or twice, why should they listen to you? So, no, he put a level of scholarship and a level of writing in there that I hadn't seen often before. Again, there are exceptions, so I don't want to put anybody down. But there wasn't a lot of that, and it really took off with David, but other people like Tom Weaver and Greg Mank, etc. But I guess David was the one that opened my eyes.
Yeah, I think he really did turn around the whole scholarly approach to horror, which really did not exist, as you say. I think that's a great point that you make. Just a couple of questions more, Frank, before we let you go. Have you thought about that next project? Have you finalized it? Have you started it at this point?
I have started it. And it's the working title is called Witchcraft in the Blood. And just as this book, the book we've been talking about, brings together the devils and the angels of death from different movies and TV, this one is bringing together witches. And the eye opener to me was when I said, because I had the Christmas tree, and I'll keep the Christmas tree to myself right now, the spine of it, what makes it all, what drives it along. I'll keep that to myself for now. But I was surprised. I mean, if you say, give me a witch from the 1930s and 40s Hollywood. You say, oh, The Wicked Witch of the West. You say, give me another one. Then there's a long pause. Oh, yeah, I Married a Witch. I say, okay, that's two. Give me another one.
Yeah.
Then there's not much. It's not until the 1950s that witches take off like a broomstick, a hypersonic broomstick. There's witches all over the place.
Yeah.
But they're really rare before 1950.
Yeah, you've written about zombies, werewolves, mummies, King Kong. So witchcraft will be a new area for you. And I guess that might just leave vampires could be after that.
No, that leaves me. That's going to be book number 9, trilogy number 3, and then I retire.
Okay.
And A is I'm getting old. B is when I decide to write a book, that really dominates my leisure reading until the book is done, because I had to do a lot of reading for the. I was lucky. There have been all these tragedies and historic events that are in the Devil's Book. I was lucky. There is a really good book written, at least one really good book written on each one that gives all the detailed history, the kind of thing I need. But that's a fair amount of reading. And unlike you, I don't read all that fast. And to be honest, most of my leisure reading is in the bathtub. So I don't read all that fast. And so it dominated. And there's all these books I'd like to read. And the book I'm reading now in connection to my witchcraft book is, believe it or not, The Making of a President, 1968 by Theodore White, who wrote a whole series of books on making of a president. And I'd never read one before. And I'm reading this. This is great stuff. I wish I could read the other 1960, 64, 68, 72. So there's three or more in this series, but I don't need them because the book takes place in 1968. And I said, gee, I got to read these, but I can't read them until this book is done. So I'm looking forward to being a free man in terms of my leisure reading.
Final question for Frank. What's the best way for people to get the book? Deals with the Devil, Dialogues with Death. Where should they go?
Okay, it's available on Amazon. It's available on eBay. Ron Adams' company, Creepy Classics, sells it. And I have my own website, occultmoviespress.com. All one word. And every book, no matter who you buy them from, is autographed and numbered, by the way. I number my books, which is a bookkeeping nightmare, even for a small number of books. But I do number them.
Well, the book is tremendous. I'm really enjoying it. Deals with the Devil, Dialogues with Death, published earlier this spring by Cult Movies Press, and of course, written by Frank Dello Stritto. Frank, we very much appreciate your time, as always.
Okay, and thank you. And I'm always glad to be with you. And you and Tracy are A1 in my book.
Well, we appreciate that. Our thanks to Frank Dello Stritto. Also, of course, my thanks to Tracy Asteria. Also, thanks to the gremlins in my studio here at home, which turned off the lights on me earlier. You might have noticed that. We thank all of you for joining us as well in this Museum of the Macabre. And we hope to see you again next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.